Celtics Reddit podcast.
Back out to Smart. Fakes the pass all the time. Three. Bang! Gets Williams screen. Lobs it up for Robert Williams.
Should he know? Jaylen Brown. What a thunder!
Tatum. Durant, the long reach. Tatum crossover pull-up jumper. It's good. 50 points for Jason Tatum.
Hello and welcome to the Celtics Reddit podcast. Ben Vallis here. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. Wayne Spooney on the call as well. Spooney, how's it going, sir?
Doing good, Ben. How about you?
Yeah, doing all right. Mostly because we've got a first-time guest we'd like to welcome, professional sports fan and host of The Athletics, Anything is Poddable podcast, the best name Celtics podcast out there, Sam Packard. Welcome, Mr. Packard. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. I also appreciate that compliment on the name Anything is Poddable because I thought that name was awful. It took us a lot of stuff to, a lot of tries just to settle on that, but that's the first I can compliment I've ever heard on it, so I appreciate it.
Oh, well, I mean, we know more than anyone how difficult it is to name a podcast. We've gone with a very literal name for our podcast and currently kicking around some new name ideas, and all of them are terrible. So thank you for taking
like
the
shit.
one good name. Yeah, that's right. So
There's
true
like
compliments.
35 Celtics podcasts, so it's like really hard to come up with a new one.
Yeah.
And like that's not the garden party or something like that, and so I wish you good luck. I think the literal works. Like if you would do SEO, I think if you have Celtics and podcasts in the title, I think that's good for you guys.
Okay, well, we'll have to consider that. Look, before we get into, I guess, the full show, we have to touch on Bill Russell a little bit, who sadly passed away earlier this week at 88 years old. And there's so much good coverage, of the life and times of Bill Russell out there already, produced by, far more qualified people than myself and Spoons. So in an attempt to take, I guess, a different angle, let me ask you this, Sam. Like, we're obviously not of the Bill Russell generation, but he's been a part of every NBA fan's experience in one way or another. What has Bill Russell meant to you as a Hoops fan? And like, when can you remember him kind of becoming like part of your fandom experience?
I got like two different answers when it comes to this. There's one on the court thing, which is just so I grew up. My dad was like the one who introduced me to basketball in the Celtics. He was an 80s Celtics season ticket holder and definitely watched the Celtics growing up. And I'd like to say he taught Bill Russell's games, but I have no idea if that's actually true. But he's the kind of one who first told me the lore of Bill Russell. And the thing that always stuck out to me is like obviously like he passed away recently, and you saw the kind of just the insane statistics with the number of championships, the record in Game 7 games, and just the incredible run of winning. But the thing that always was just wild to me is that when he blocked a shot and it went out of bounds, he didn't think that was a success. Like the only things that were like successful block shots for him were like block shots that he was able to control and tip to his teammates. And that's just another level of defense on the basketball. Like, why is that? It's just like, I think it's like unreasonable and unfathomable to think about today's game. Like someone that dominant on the defensive end that they would be tipping blocks to their teammates. Like right now, it's just you just trying to get your hand on the ball, but he was like controlling the ball in that regard, and that just like always blew my mind. It's like that's just never something I think we'll ever see or ever just like comprehend like how dominant he actually was.
The Time Lord needs to get on that shit. I mean, he's just blindly blocking shit out of bounds at all times. Spoony, what are sort of the emerging Bill Russell memories for you?
I will say about Time Lord, though, it's always so awesome when he like volleyballs it to the 10th row. I get so hyped. So I don't know if I want him to totally stop. I have a much worse answer. I think Bill Russell. I really learned about him through the prism of Tommy Heinsohn and watching Celtics games, and Tommy just talking about Bill Russell endlessly and how awesome he was playing with Bill Russell, who is also awesome, and how many championships they won. And is that Greg Stiesma? That guy's basically Bill Russell. I mean, I guess just like growing up in Massachusetts and following the Celtics for as long as I can really remember, he's just always been like an institution around the team, as much as like Lucky the Leprechaun in some ways. And I don't mean to like trivialize Bill in that way, but he is the Celtics. He was the walking Boston Celtics. Like, that is Bill Russell. He's here. He meant everything to this team, everything to this city. And I don't know. I don't have a specific moment where I can really think like that's when it clicked in my head who he was. He was just like always there. It's like when did you realize your parents were your parents? I don't know. Like, they've just always been there. So, yeah, I'm a much worse answer.
It's like, in any TV show where they're depicting like the protagonist in a simulation and they're like, do you remember how you got here? And the answer is always like, actually, I don't. Bill Russell, very similar. It's like, we don't really remember him ever coming into our lives. He was just always there. He's the pillar at the end of the road of Celtics history that you look back, and he's basically at the beginning of it, along with like Walter Brown and Red Auerbach and stuff like that. So rest in peace, obviously, Bill Russell. And like I said, there's a lot of much better coverage on Bill Russell out there. In particular, I think this morning on the Celtics Talk podcast, they released an interview, Tommy Heinsohn interviewing Bill Russell, and they go into like Walter Brown bringing Bill Russell into his office and like showing him all the paperwork of like owning the Celtics and how they were in debt, and just wanting to be completely transparent with Bill Russell and basically saying like, I'm never going to pay anyone more than I pay you, but I need that loyalty from you in return. And that was sort of like the formation of this beautiful relationship that obviously went on for the entirety of his career. Spoonie, moving on, we've got some new signings to get to. Do you want to kick us off with
Huge
Bruno
moves.
and a spicy Reddit comment?
Bruno Caboclo, the Celtics signed him to, I think, an Exhibit 10 deal. They're bringing him in. He's going to have a chance to make the roster. We got a Reddit comment here. He's amazed by President Brad. Big fan of the show, President Brad. He's amazingly somehow only 26-year-old, 6'9", with a freaky 7'7" wingspan, and he had 1 year in Memphis where he averaged 8 points, which is way better than I would have expected. So, Jam, do you have any expectations of Bruno Caboclo? Can you remember watching him play basketball outside of like Summer League maybe? Because I cannot. So do you have any thoughts on Bruno?
I just remember when he got drafted, they said he was 2 years away from being 2 years away. And was that 4 years ago now?
I think it was like 8 years ago.
It was 8.
Oh, God. It was 8 years ago. So I have no expectations for Bruno whatsoever. I just like that Brad refuses to bring in any young guys. Like, if you notice, like, everyone on the roster, other than, I think, Peyton Pritchard, is, like, over 25 years old. Brad just is, and he's just trading away draft picks left and right. Brad just, if you're a young basketball player, Brad Stevens does not want to see you on his team. And that's, like, my biggest takeaway from the Brewers. Just like, we could get a young guy, maybe just out of college. Maybe we'll get rid of Jason Tatum's friends. Nope, we're just going to get a guy who's been bopping around Brazil for the past 6 years. All right, Brad, you do whatever you want.
The Brazilian KD, come on.
Yeah, there's definitely, like, there's, at least from a physical dimension standpoint, there's something to get excited about. Like, he does have the body and sort of the presence of a talented NBA player. It's just maybe he hasn't had the right opportunity. Who knows? Maybe you can suit up for Brad and Ime there and show us what he's been waiting to show the world this whole time. This is the kind of optimism the offseason needs. Am I wrong?
I think it's a great optimism to think that Ime Udoka is even going to entertain the idea of putting him on the floor. After running basically a 7.5-man rotation last year, the idea of Ime going to his deep bench and be like, Bruno, get in there, is laughable.
Show us what you got. I love it.
I don't think I've ever heard an NBA player described as having dimensions. He's got great dimensions.
Yeah. He is tall. He's tall and
very
he's long.
roomy.
We love length. We love girth on this podcast. Noah Vonleh, 26-year-old, 6'10", power forward / center, drafted 9th overall in 2014. We got a Reddit comment here from the ghost of Jerry Welsh, who says, I like the idea of bringing in these still young-ish guys who have some pedigree coming out of the draft and just couldn't put it together at this level. Who knows if there's still some untapped potential there, different fit, different system, or just players naturally maturing. Could be all it takes to turn these guys into potential role players, or at least the end of the bench options. Packard, thoughts on Noah Vonleh? Like, are you higher on him than you are on Bruno, or where do you stand with this guy?
I feel like I'm lower on Vonleh. I'm of two thoughts. He's from Haverhill. He's like a local guy from kind of the Boston area, so you got to give him credit for that. But he was a higher draft pick, and I feel like I remember watching him play and watching him fail. So that's I have bad basketball memories for him, and so maybe he has the high pedigree. He was a top draft pick. He has clearly more NBA experience. I think he's more likely to touch the floor than Bruno, but who knows at this point? I just think these are kind of, you needed to have a number of guys on your roster before you started training camp, so why not bring in 2 guys? But I don't know. I'm not paid to scout, guys 13 through 15 on the roster. One way of putting it.
Yeah, I think that's a scattering report. So it sounds like failure is the commonality between these 2 pickups. So good work, Brad Stevens. Spoonie, anything to add there before we move on?
I feel like Vonleh's got a few all-star appearances in his future, but no, I mean, they're lottery tickets, right? Like, they can kind of maybe shoot. I think that's kind of interesting. If you're tall and can kind of maybe shoot, like, you might have an NBA career ahead of you. It's also like kind of how you could describe Caboclo and Luke Cornett too. Like, if these guys could maybe make a few threes and like not get totally roasted on defense, they'll probably be an NBA player for a long time. So I kind of get the thinking from Brad, like, hey, these guys kind of washed out, but they got the good pedigree. Like, let's see if they just all fight it out and see who's the 4th big, or the 3rd big, because I guess unless that's Luke Cornett, which I kind of hope not. But yeah,
it's Cornett. You gotta get on the Cornett train now. I'm expecting big things from Luke this season.
All right, okay, all right. I if he makes some shots, he can protect the rim a little bit. Bill Russell blocks going. So yeah, I'll just, best man wins, for that 4th spot.
Can you expand on that, Sam? Like, what exactly are you expecting from Big Bird Cornett this season? Have you got legitimate hopes for him?
I expect him to play a little bit and not be terrible.
Huge.
He had some moments, like, he's definitely, like, he's very awkward out there. He kind of runs like a moose, I would say. Maybe a deer, some sort of wild animal, but I just think that, like, he's decent enough to have seen him knock down some threes. He's definitely worse than Tice, but I think he's serviceable enough to be your 3rd big. And so if you need to play him for 2 6-minute stretches in the regular season, like, per game, I think that you can survive those moments. I think, like, he's a serviceable big man. I don't think he's great. I don't think he's flashy. But I think he can do enough, and he is large. And he's got the dimensions that you guys are looking for.
He does, yeah. Length and girth. Lofty expectations. Sorry, Spoons.
Luke, surprisingly, like, I maybe I'm just latching on to one game where he played really well 2 years ago against Oklahoma City, but him and Tatum actually had some, like, nice little pick and roll and, like, handoff action going. Like, they had kind of good chemistry. And I think he's averaging like 5 assists a game in the G League. So I don't know, maybe there's a little something there as kind of like Horford-y type of stuff at the top of the key. I don't know. That's probably expecting too much, but you know what I mean.
Horford-y stuff. I love it. Okay. Transitioning slightly, Sam Packard. We've listened to you on the Reigning Jays back in the day, and now on the Athletics. Anything is Poddable. It's the off season. We've just been through literally all of the Celtics news that there is at this moment in time. So I want to hear a little bit more about you. You're known as a professional Celtics fan or a professional sports fan. How did you go from sort of fandom to, like, how did you go pro, I guess? Like, all of us are fans, and now you're like the one professional fan out there. So how does that transition work?
I started calling myself a professional sports fan. I think is the main way that happened. So out of college, I started working for WEEI, which is one of the obnoxious sports talk radio stations here in Boston, and they had a blog at that point where they're like a website where they would cover Celtics games, and I was a producer for them, and no one really wanted to hear me talk, and so I figured I would like kind of try to create a niche for myself, because obviously I thought I had important things to say. And so I started going to games that way and writing stories, like game stories, like pretty like generic stuff. No one read them whatsoever. Like, who was reading weei.com to try and like figure out what happened in the game? That's just like not what happened. And so, but like also I like had been aware of podcasting for like a decent amount of time, and thought like at that point this was I think like 2014, like there wasn't a lot of people doing podcast stuff, and so I borrowed or I guess I didn't borrow this because it happened a while ago, but I started a podcast just called WEI Celtics Podcast. Basically just because I wanted my own opportunity on to talk on the mic, and I didn't think there's a space there. I was eventually able to lure Jared Weiss in to kind of start doing it with me. And my first year was Brad's first year, and they went on that just run where I think in retrospect, stupid they made the playoffs where they had no business being in the playoffs, and they got just absolutely trounced. But we managed to trick Chris Forsberg into coming on the pod after every single playoff game and actually get some listeners and build up a little bit of a following that way. And it just kind of built from there. That podcast became a little bit bigger, and then when the Reigning Jays went to a everyday type thing, they asked me to come aboard, and just kind of snowballed from there, I guess.
We're very familiar with tricking Chris Forsberg to come on your podcast.
Tricked him several times.
He's way too nice of guy.
We'll trick him again, yes. I'm sure.
So what, Jim, what is, when you think back, in your formative years, so growing up, I grew up on a lot of the dark ages, late 90s, Celtics, and then I would say where my fandom really locked in was that 2001 Eastern Conference Finals run with Pierce and Twan. So what's a formative Celtics memory, you can think of where you're like, this is my shit. This is what I want to do.
I mean, I was definitely a huge, everything Boston sports fan growing up, just in the Boston area. For some reason, when you said that, the first name that popped in my mind was Eric Williams, for those those early 2000s teams. But I wasn't the biggest Celtics fan then. I definitely became we followed the 2008 run. I don't think I became fully invested in the Celtics until I started being able to cover the team and go to in the Brad Stevens area, and I don't know, just being able to go to the game, go to the games, and you just be there every single day, and then being able to go to the locker room and talk to the players. It just was it was oh my god, you can learn so much, and I feel that's when I fully dove in. It was just all right, this is going to be my thing. I just really like Brad, and he's kind of his philosophy, growth mindset, Kaizen things is that's where I really bought in. And so and it's him, and when Isaiah Thomas came, it's just oh my god, this guy's amazing. And that it's that's when I fully dove in heads first. I'm not going to pay attention to any other sports. It's going to be all Celtics all the time. I think it was in that stupid playoff. I convincing Chris Forsberg who had a big impact on my career.
Amazing.
That IT years, looking back, that was probably one of, if not the most fun time to follow the team, because the expectations were absolutely nothing, and they always exceeded them. So there was just so happy. The vibes were so immaculate during those days, and now I fear this year. I'm just worried. That's all I'll say, with the expectations so high.
Yeah, it's fair to say about those IT years, it's not corny to say so that it was, magical. There was a sort of a magicness to the success that team found, and that it was all spearheaded by, the little guy, this tiny, tiny little basketball man who just had insane talent, who won so many games in such a spirited fashion. Sam, if you could own one piece of Celtics memorabilia, from all time, what would it be? And, entertain us, pick a fantasy item, you'll never own this, there's no chance that you could ever get your hands on it, and then maybe a realistic item that when you quote unquote make it one day and you've got $1 billion in the bank, you could potentially buy it.
It's got to be something unique. I don't want anything generic. I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that's in Celtics folklore. Oh wow, that's a tough one. For some reason, my mind also jumped to Yabu. If I could have something of Yabu's statue, that would be pretty sweet.
It's the statue of the booty, derriere extraordinaire.
Seat cushion.
Yeah, maybe one of his headbands. Maybe the magical bow and arrow dab that he did. If I could have an NFT of that. Those are obviously not the great things, and not just But I have such moments. If they have something, one of my favorite memories from covering the Celtics was remember that game. I think the Celtics recently did a remember this type moment of that on Instagram, whereas when they came back against the Rockets when they were down 20 points, and Marcus Smart drew those 2 charges on James Harden. that was like one of the most electric, wild games. And I'm trying to think of like how I could go back to that moment and like get some piece of memorabilia from that, like maybe some piece of James Harden's beard from that game. Or like, I don't know how. I'm not a very sentimental memorabilia focused guy, clearly, because I'm struggling with this answer, but that's the best I have for now. I don't know. I'll take any suggestions from you guys. There's one piece of memorabilia that I had, but I no longer have, which is awesome, and I would kick myself for having this. After the confetti game, I was in Philadelphia, and I went onto the floor, and I sweeped up as much confetti as I could possibly have.
Oh, man.
That
was going to be my answer.
And I did it. Was it really? I had a giveaway on Locked On Celtics. I was like sent out like probably parts of it to like 10 different fans. But now I was like looking through my stuff and I just don't have any confetti left. So there's 10 fans out there that have that actual confetti. But I wish I'm kicking myself because I don't have it anymore.
Yeah, like there's so many obviously memorable moments in Celtics history, but the Schadenfreude memorabilia, like the thing that reminds you of the pain of another fan base, like to me that's the most valuable item I could possess. Spoonie, what do you think? You got any answers on this one?
This might be a weird one. KG's sweaty shirt that he was wearing when he screamed anything is possible, I feel like would be cool. Yeah. And then realistic, I don't maybe like a signed Aaron Nesmith jersey, something like that.
You've got the unsigned one. You could.
I'm halfway there.
I think that's like very obtainable.
Yeah.
His AAU coach would always call into anything as Poddable,
Yeah,
so I think I can look it up if you need it.
I love that guy. Me and that dude, we're like tight, man. I was always like cheering when he was getting his takes off with you.
Yeah.
I think sadly it's no more. I don't think he's going to be calling into the pod anymore, but I love Richard from South Carolina. He was always a welcome guest.
Yeah, well, we'll talk offline and see if we can hook up that autograph, because that will absolutely, Spoonie will die a happy man if he gets his Nesmith jersey signed. And look, if you're listening to the show, if you've got any answers on Celtics memorabilia, fantasy or realistic or otherwise, let us know your thoughts. There's got to be some good answers out there.
There's something, what Kelly O'Neill Game 7 headband, I think would be like, it has to be a unique item, but I think that's another great thing. Maybe I don't know. I was just trying to think of something from that magical Isaiah run. Defeating the Wizards was just such a sweet victory.
Yeah,
that was one of the most fun series, man. And then LeBron really made that bittersweet.
Yeah. I do think like a clay mold of Yabu's like booty, there's something there. Maybe it would, develop value over time. It could be sold on eBay in the future. Or like Larry Bird's like early 80s mustache, if you could have that somehow laser removed from his face and then imprinted on, I don't know, some sort of statue of Larry Bird. On my face,
your face.
Yeah, permanently implanted. Now we're talking. All right, let's move on. So, in NBA.com's latest 2022-23 power rankings, the Celtics are ranked number 1. Sam, how fucked are we because of that? And should we anticipate someone breaking an ankle 5 minutes into the season?
I don't know if we need to anticipate that, but like I do not like that level of expectations. That is not good. People if Chris Middleton was not injured, they might not get gotten out of the second round. I don't like expectations at all. Because everything, as long as they don't pose for a magazine article, all like the starting five saying who's stopping us, I think like we'll be safe. As long as there's not like clear hubris, but that's like not good. I like just remember writing like the season after Al Horford left. I wrote something for Boston.com just being like, hey, this team's not going to be the same team. Let's just like lower expectations and enjoy the basketball. And then we went on that kind of crazy run that was like ended with the bubble, and it was like a lot of fun. And so that is my one concern heading into the Celtics season is just like what happens when expectations are so high. Celtics fans are already insane after one regular season loss, but like with heightened championship expectations, when they inevitably lose to the Orlando Magic in early December on a game they should absolutely win, like people are going to go bananas. And I was just like, how do the Celtics react to that? I just can't wait for Ime Udoka just to be such an asshole. And I'm actually kind of looking forward to that because Hardo Ime is one of my favorites. But like,
It's the best.
It's like if things don't go their way to start the season, like how like they can't afford to have a start like they did have like last year. And I think there's like a lot more pressure on them to start the season out well, so they can rest players, so they can kind of coast more in the regular season. So now being number one in the league, I would much rather be the team that's like everyone picks against, and they have some internal motivation, be like nobody believes in us.
The fan base hubris is starting to get a little out of control. We have a Reddit post here that's from user Thin Rap, and he says the team is set for a championship, and most of y'all need to calm down. Assuming nothing crazy happens between now and October, this team is poised for a rematch with the Warriors. And then he goes on to say Vonleh is great, and this is the best team since
Vonleh
2008.
in the championship post. I love it.
Yeah, Vonleh starting power forward. I'm hoping, maybe this is like a ridiculous take, but I wonder if Tatum and Brown's experience in 18-19, when it was just a complete shit show, expectations were super high, they thought they'd just basically walk their way back to the Eastern Conference Finals, and the addition of Hardo Ime, maybe that will be enough where this team doesn't take anything for granted, doesn't take their talent for granted, actually goes out and plays. Because you're right, Jam, like you can't just bet on going like 30-7 in the second half of the season every year. Like that just does not happen. You have to get lucky. So do you think there's any, I mean, do you trust that? Like, I don't know, man. I'm terrified.
The one thing that I think that makes me feel better about this season than like that other year is that they went on that crazy run without Kyrie and Hayward, and like Terry Rozier thought he deserved minutes, Marcus Morris thought he deserved minutes, Jaylen Brown thought he deserved minutes. None of them thought Gordon Hayward deserved minutes, and like Brad immediately gave it to him, and so there was this like clear. Everyone was unhappy. I think with this current Celtics team, there's a clear hierarchy. There's something that works. I think the biggest question is like, how does Brogdon come in and fit as the sixth man, and is that like a role he's willing to accept? And like, I have no indication that he's not like going to be that type of guy, but he is a guy who's been a starter for the past couple of seasons, and like Derek White, I'm sure is a guy who's expected to be a starter. It's like, is everyone going to be happy with their minutes enough to kind of buy in and sacrifice and do that kind of team stuff? I have much more faith in this team to be able to do that, just because it feels like they have the structure in place, whereas that 2019 team was just, one had Kyrie and two was just had like a bunch of other guys who thought they wanted minutes.
Yeah, for sure. Which, like, coming into next year, which Eastern Conference opponent gives you the most anxiety?
It's the Bucks.
Sure. They
have Giannis. I mean, like, Giannis is insane. I think he ran out of gas in the playoffs just because he had to do absolutely anything. And Chris Middleton, also known demon, who always destroys the Celtics. And so I was very glad not to see him. I just think, like, when you combine Giannis, who's just absolutely the best player in the league right now, and give him a little bit of help, that Bucks team, who the Celtics still, like, the Bucks team still took the Celtics to 7 games, is just going to be much harder out. And so that is the team I think is like the most concerning, the biggest challenge to the Celtics.
Yeah, and do you think that the additions we've made, like Brogdon and Gallinari, is that enough to cover for the sort of re-addition of Middleton back into that Bucks squad come playoff time?
I do. Like, I am still a Celtics optimist at heart, and I think like Brogdon and Gallinari is like the perfect addition. If you were able to keep the same exact core together and really not give up anything, I think that's amazing. I think it'll add them more depth, a little bit more shooting from Gallinari, which I think will be important. But I also think it's not like guaranteed. Like, it's not like the marginal improvements on the roster is like, oh, we brought in a Giannis stopper. Like, we do have Grant Williams, but like, who knows if that's going to be enough. And so I still think it would be a very close series. Obviously, I would pick the Celtics. Obviously, I think but it's not like, oh, now that we have Malcolm Brogdon, we're clearly the Eastern Conference favorites. I think there's like the Celtics and the Bucks are in a tier. The Sixers might be there if they could ever get out of the second round, or if James Harden like actually plays serious basketball. And then there's like other teams that I think will be good, but it's not like the Celtics are head and shoulders above everyone else in the East.
Yeah, definitely not. I'm actually shocked we're the title favorites at this point too, because I feel like we did I mean, it's kind of bullshit, but the Bucks did take us to 7 without Middleton, so I think you can make a good argument they're the favorite, maybe a step above us. Philly also scares the hell out of me, because personally, one of my very good friends is a Sixers fan, and I've been like dancing on his grave for like 15 years now, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that to turn. And two, like, watching a playoff series with Embiid and Harden would be one of the most difficult, obnoxious things I would ever have to experience. I just don't want to go through that.
Yeah, the free throws alone would be nauseating. And then just having any of your friends' team beat you, it's like, it's worse than like the Gordon Hayward injury. It's worse than anything. One of your friends being able to shit on you like indefinitely after a loss is it's more painful than anything else.
Especially if they're a Philly sports fan, they're a special brand of obnoxious.
Philly trash. Yeah, he's interestingly like, you guys own us. He's like got the Embiid attitude. We're like, you guys own us. I can't talk any shit.
How quickly that would change if they beat us in the playoffs.
They're up at halftime in game one.
I
That shit's
know,
going to
it would
change
not take
immediately.
Yeah.
That's basically how it happens in the first quarter if they're beating us. You'd be like, good game, huh? Like, you fucking asshole. But anyway, all right, changing gears here. So, Jim, we've asked like most of our guests this question, so I'm going to hit you with it here. So the Celtics have had like a variety of meme players, like dudes that don't play a ton, but the fandom wants to see them get more time. Usually it's like physical oddities or crazy, athletes. Like Rob's probably the most successful. Yabu and Taco are probably our duds. We had Max Letterman on. He said the next one is Aaron Nesmith. Forsberg, which obviously is not going to play out. Forsberg went with Johan Bagarin. So who would you pick from? I'll give you some candidates. J.D. Davison, Caboclo, Bagarin, Yamadar, or somebody, Noah Vonleh, who's obviously going to be an all-star. Like, who do you think is this sort of bench guy that in 2 years we're going to be like, see, the fans were right for once, Udoka. You should have been playing this guy more.
If it's 2 years, I like the Yuhan pick just because he's an obscene athlete and crazy and French. I feel like the being from France, it helped with Yabu, it helped with Vinny Sexpants. Like, there's definitely just an element there that I think is naturally lends itself to memeability. I think for this upcoming season, it's someone we've already talked about. The Green Hornet, Luke Cornett. Like, I think he's the meme guy. Because to be a meme guy, you can't just be like a name. You have to do a little bit on the court. You just have to be like Vinny Sexpants.
Exactly.
Never really panned out as a full meme guy because he was terrible. But Yabu showed flashes of moments. I feel like Evan Turner was absolutely the meme guy just because he absolutely said ridiculous things, but then also had his moments on the courts. And I think maybe the theme of the podcast is just me being overly hyped about Luke Cornett. I do think anytime he knocks down a three, people are going to go hype, and so that's my pick for the upcoming season.
We're gonna send this to Luke Cornett's people.
Love it.
Spoonie, who have you changed your prediction on this, or I actually can't remember who you went with initially.
Are you kidding me? Nesmith.
Of course. Yeah. Well, you have to make another choice now.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Bagarin. Although, since he probably won't come over this year, I'm going to go with Caboclo. I loved what I saw out of him at a summer league. I am irrationally high on him. Convinced myself he's going to be able to make threes, block shots, and catch lobs. So I'm going Cabs.
Yeah, I think that's a solid choice. I think he's primed to fill that role. Who I think's an outside chance? Tell me if I'm completely out of line here, but Danilo Gallinari, I think. Maybe there's a lot of these Italian gesturing on the bench and from the fan base. His minutes reduction will mean that he kind of fits the bill for this meme kind of player.
Right.
Obviously, he's going to be in the rotation, but he's advancing in age and he's declining in role, and he's just staunch Italianness. I think makes him a prime candidate for meme player.
I think that's a great pick. I think the European factor is definitely helping his regard. Have you seen his Twitter posts of him working out in the summer, where he recently posted one where it was just added a new trick to my bag, and it was just a behind the back dribble. I don't know if that was just unintentional comedy or intentional comedy, but I thought that was great. That was fantastic stuff. I was like, yes, Danilo. That's the kind of shit posting I want to see. That's like a great pick for a memeable guy.
The professor over here with the behind the back dribble. I love it. Looking through the roster, like Sam Hauser, I think is another option where if he sort of showcases himself a little bit, gets more of an opportunity. There's like the whole house money thing. He hits a three, everyone tweets out house money. There's that. I don't know. Clutching at straws here. We're at the end of the podcast. We're running out of content.
You need to have some guy. The guy has to have some sort of personality where it's like Abby Chin would want to have like a goofy Celtics post-up interview with him, and I just haven't seen that from Hauser. Yeah. Danilo, though, I think it could be content gold. Yes. It's really all about content. And so you need to be on the court, and you need to provide a good soundbite.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be reaching out to Gallinari's people as well. I think that brings us to
He's
the
a
end
big
of the
fan
pod.
of the pod.
Yeah, Spoons or Jam, have you guys got anything else you want to add before we wrap this one up?
Nothing for me.
There's nothing going, hey. There's nothing going on.
No.
Hopefully that changes in the next week or so. Otherwise, we're in big trouble, Spoon.
I might steal that question for anything is Poddable this week because, like you said, we're in the depths of August, and there is nothing to talk about unless me and Jay want to go 15 minutes on Bruno.
Jay might.
By all means, these questions are for the people.
Yeah, please. Absolutely.
All right, that is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead and like, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. Spoonie, love your work, mate. And Sam Packard, this was great, man. Thanks so much for coming on. Have you got anything you want to plug, like anything coming up aside from the next Anything is Poddable pod?
Sure. Actually, tomorrow I'm a guest on a YouTube show for Underdog Fantasy, the Trill Withers show.
Hell yeah.
And tomorrow, live at noon, I will be eating a chop suey sandwich, and it is the grossest thing in the world. I don't know how I'm going to get through it. It looks like squid noodles on a weird potato bun. It's going to be absolutely awful, so if you want to watch me just basically torture myself, I did it only for a couple subscribers on the show's YouTube channel. That will be going on tomorrow, August 3rd at noon. So make sure to tune into that if you want to see me be embarrassed and probably for a while.
See, there you go. There's plenty of content out there. What are we talking about? The off-season content's drying up. Packard's eating chop suey tomorrow. We've got plenty going on, which is great. If you find you enjoy the pain for whatever reason, we'll get you back on and we'll have you eat a Vegemite sandwich live on the podcast as well, which would be great. All right, folks. Thank you for tuning in. We will be back next week. Until then, go Celtics. Peace.